All right, so today we're going to deep dive into how to prep for a chemical manufacturing quality technician interview.
Yeah, and we've got a whole bunch of RoleCatcher resources that can really help you nail it.
Definitely a ton of really cool stuff they offer. So let's just dive right into it.
Sounds good.
Okay, imagine you're in that interview and they hit you with, describe your experience with quality control testing.
Right.
Um, what are your thoughts on tackling a question like that?
Well, you definitely don't want to just rattle off a list of every test you've ever done.
Yeah,
It's more about tailoring it to what they're looking for in that specific role.
right.
So let's say the job description mentions pharmaceutical products, right? You'd want to focus on your experience with things like pH testing, assay techniques, and maybe sterility checks if that's relevant.
Makes sense. So really make sure you're emphasizing the stuff that's most relevant to them.
Exactly.
But okay, so everyone's going to be doing that right. Like
Yeah.
everyone's going to tailor their answer. What else can you do to stand out and make yourself memorable?
That's where a well-chosen story can really make a difference.
Oh, okay.
So let's say you start with something like, during a stability study, I noticed one sample was deviating from the expected trend.
Okay.
And then you walk them through what you did, how you investigated the issue, how you documented it, and maybe even what you learned from the experience that changed your approach to future testing.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it shows them you're proactive and not just mindlessly following a checklist.
Totally. Okay, so we've talked about experience now. What about questions related to safety? I mean, that's got to be huge in this field.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Safety is paramount in chemical manufacturing.
Yep.
You might get a question like, how do you ensure compliance with safety regulations in a chemical manufacturing environment?
Okay.
And this is where knowing the specific regulations is super important. OSHA guidelines, HAZMAT protocols, anything relevant to that particular industry.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh.
But again, we don't just want to sound like a textbook reciting the rules. So what's a good real-world example we could use?
Let's say you noticed a colleague wasn't wearing the proper PPE while handling a solvent.
Okay. Yeah.
You could say something like, I politely reminded them of the protocol, explained the potential risks, and offered to help them find the right gear.
Oh, that's good.
Right. It shows you're not only safety conscious, but also a team player.
Exactly. Knowledge plus action. I like it. Okay, so now they want to dig into your analytical skills.
Uh-huh.
How do you handle a question like, what experience do you have with analyzing data and generating reports?
This is where you really highlight those software skills. Excel for sure, maybe some specialized programs depending on what the job description mentions.
Okay.
But the real magic is in connecting those skills to real-world impact.
So don't just say, I can use Excel.
Right. It's more like, by analyzing production data in software name, I identified a recurring temperature fluctuation that was affecting product consistency. My report led to the equipment being recalibrated, and that actually reduced defects by 15%.
Oh, wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, quantifiable results always make a bigger impact.
Definitely. Okay, so before we jump into more questions, I wanted to touch on RoleCatcher's AI. People are going crazy for this thing for interview prep.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
What is it about it that's so helpful?
Well, they have a massive library of interview questions, over 120,000 of them, specific to different roles, including this one.
Whoa, that's a lot.
Right. And the AI analyzes your answers and gives you feedback.
So like what kind of feedback?
Okay, so let's say you're practicing your answer to that data analysis question we just talked about. You type it into RoleCatcher and the AI looks it over. It might suggest adding specific metrics or tweaking the wording to better align with the company's values.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's like having a personalized feedback loop to help you craft the perfect answer.
Wild. Okay, I definitely want to hear more about that AI later on, but let's get back to those questions. What about describe your experience with root cause analysis? That seems like a big one.
Definitely. They're really trying to gauge your problem-solving skills with that one. You want to go beyond just explaining the concept. So think of a story. Let's say a batch of product failed a purity test. Instead of just retesting, you could say, I used root cause analysis. By tracing back through the logs, I discovered that a faulty filter had been used upstream. Replacing the filter and retraining the team on proper filter checks solved the issue permanently.
Oh, that's a really good example.
Yeah, it shows them you're not just fixing the problem, but also preventing it from happening again.
Exactly. Finding the why not just the why. Okay, this is great stuff. Let's keep going and see what other tricky questions we can tackle.
Sounds good to me. So, we've been talking a lot about interview questions, but before we go any further, I wanted to touch on career paths for a second.
Okay. Yeah, RoleCatcher has those really cool guides that kind of give you a glimpse into the future. What
Exactly.
do they say about the different stages you might go through as a chemical manufacturing quality technician?
Well, they break it down into entry-level junior and senior roles, each with more and more responsibility as you move up.
Okay, that makes sense. So what would you say are the main things you'd be doing at the entry level?
At the entry level, it's a lot of hands-on work, performing tests, meticulously recording data, really getting familiar with the equipment and the standard procedures.
Okay, so building those core skills.
Mm.
Then what changes when you move into a junior role?
You start taking on more ownership, I'd say. So instead of just executing the tests, you might be involved in troubleshooting some minor issues, analyzing trends in the data, and maybe even helping to draft some simple reports.
So it's not just doing the work, but actually understanding the why behind it.
Right, exactly. And then at the senior level, that's where you really step into a leadership position. You might be mentoring new technicians, overseeing more complex quality control projects, and even helping to develop new procedures based on your experience.
Wow, so you go from hands-on to overseeing the entire process.
It's a pretty cool progression.
It is, it is. And you said those guides have examples of people at different stages too.
Yeah, they do. So you can get a better sense of the specific skills and experience that are expected at each level.
That's really helpful, especially when you're just starting out and trying to figure out where you want to go.
Definitely.
Okay, so back to those interview questions. What about when they ask something like, how do you ensure compliance with good manufacturing practices? GMP.
GMP. That's a big one.
It is. It is.
It's all about making sure products are consistently produced and controlled according to these very strict quality standards.
So kind of like the foundation of trust for things like pharmaceuticals, food cosmetics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Things that people rely on to be safe and effective.
Right, right.
Right.
So how do you answer that in a way that shows you really get it?
Okay. Well, instead of just saying, I know what GMP is,
Yeah.
you could try something like, in my previous role, I was responsible for training new hires on our GMP protocols for handling sensitive reagents. I developed a checklist and a hands-on demonstration which actually reduced errors by 20%.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Right. It's about showcasing your actions, not just your knowledge.
Exactly. And I bet RoleCatcher's AI could help with this too.
Oh, for sure. It might suggest adding specific GMP elements that you didn't even think of.
Like what?
Well, maybe mentioning documentation practices or deviation reporting procedures, things that show you really understand the ins and outs of GMP.
Well, that's smart. So even if you have the experience, it can help you use the right lingo.
Okay.
Okay, what else do we have?
Let's see. How do you ensure that products meet customer specifications? That seems like a pretty common one.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a good opportunity to show that you understand quality isn't just about internal standards, but also about meeting the needs of the end user.
So how do you answer that without sounding too generic?
You could say something like, once a customer requested a specific viscosity range for a coating we were producing, I worked with the production team to adjust the formulation and then personally oversaw the testing of each batch to make sure we met their requirements exactly.
Okay, so again, it's about giving a concrete example instead of just saying you ensure things.
Right. Details are key. They are. They are. Okay, what about laboratory instrumentation?
Yes. That's your chance to show off your technical skills.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
But again, we don't want to just list off instruments.
Well, you want to go a little deeper.
Huh.
So let's say you've used a spectrophotometer.
Uh-huh.
You could say something like, I'm not only proficient in operating it, but I also routinely perform calibration checks and basic maintenance to ensure data accuracy. Once I even identified a faulty lamp that was causing inconsistent readings.
Oh, wow. So it's about taking initiative and not just passively following instructions.
Exactly. And RoleCatcher's AI can actually help here, too.
Really?
Yeah, it can suggest specific instrumentation keywords based on the job description. So if they mention HPLC or mass spectrometry, you can weave those into your answer.
That's awesome. Okay, I bet they'll definitely ask about handling quality control issues during production.
Oh, yeah, that's where things can get really tricky.
It is. It is.
They want to know that you can stay calm and think clearly under pressure.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we prepare for that?
I think the STAR method is really helpful here. STAR.
Yeah, situation, task, action, result.
Oh, okay.
So let's say a batch of solution suddenly shows high turbidity.
Okay.
You could say something like, my task was to identify the cause and get production back on track. I reviewed the batch records, sampled different stages of the process, and eventually discovered that a contaminated ingredient had been used. We quarantined the batch, replaced the ingredient, and then implemented stricter supplier checks to prevent it from happening again.
Wow, that's a really comprehensive answer.
Yeah, you want to show that you didn't just fix the immediate problem, but also thought about long-term prevention.
Definitely. And I bet RoleCatcher's AI could help with this too.
Good. It might suggest adding something like, I collaborated with the supplier to identify the root cause of the contamination on their end.
Oh, that's a good point. It shows that you went above and beyond.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, but I think we have time for a few more questions.
Awesome. Let's do it. All right, so we've covered a ton of ground here.
We have. It feels like we've tackled every single question they could possibly ask. Almost. But, it's not just about having all the technical answers.
Right.
You got to show off those soft skills too.
Definitely. Those are super important, especially in this kind of role where you're often the bridge between different departments.
Exactly. So things like teamwork communication. How do you highlight those without just saying, I'm a team player,
Right. Well, let's say they ask you about a time you had a disagreement with a colleague.
Okay.
Instead of dwelling on the conflict, focus on how you approached the situation. You could say something like, when a coworker and I disagreed on the interpretation of a test result, we sat down together, reviewed the SOP, and ultimately came to a shared understanding.
So it's about showing you can work through differences constructively, especially in a field where accuracy is so important.
Exactly.
Now, what about asking questions at the end of the interview?
Oh, that's a great way to show you're genuinely interested and that you've been paying attention.
Not just any question, right?
Right. You want to ask something thoughtful that shows you've done your homework. Instead of asking about something that's easily found on their website, you could try, I'm really impressed with your company's commitment to sustainability. Can you tell me more about how the quality team contributes to those efforts?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it shows you're thinking beyond the basics.
Definitely. Okay, so before we wrap up, I wanted to circle back to RoleCatcher's AI one last time.
Okay.
We talked about how it can help you fine-tune your answers.
Yeah.
But is there a bigger picture way it can help you prepare?
Absolutely. Imagine you take the entire job description and you plug it into RoleCatcher.
Okay.
Their AI can actually analyze it and identify the key skills and experiences that company seems to be prioritizing.
Wow.
Then when you're prepping for your interview, you can make sure those points are woven into your answers.
So it's like having a secret decoder ring for the job ad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not just guessing what they want, you're seeing it right there in the AI's analysis.
That's incredible.
Oh,
Right, I'm sold. RoleCatcher's AI is officially a must-have for interview prep.
I agree.
Okay, so any last-minute questions we should cover before we send our listener off to conquer their interview?
How about this one? How do you stay up to date with the latest industry trends and technologies?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. They're not just asking about what, they want to know that you're committed to continuous learning.
Exactly. So you could mention industry journals, you read online forums you participate in, maybe even webinars you've attended. If you've taken any courses beyond your initial training, definitely highlight that.
So it's about painting a picture of someone who's genuinely curious and invested in their professional growth.
Right. And then, of course, there's the inevitable question about salary expectations.
Oh, yeah, the one everyone dreads.
Any tips for that?
Yeah, is there a good way to handle that?
Well, research is key. Use resources like RoleCatcher. They have great salary data. You can get a realistic range for your experience level in your location. And then practice articulating your value. Something like, based on my X years of experience in Y techniques and my proven track record of Z results, I'm seeking a salary between range.
So confidence and data, the perfect combination.
Exactly.
All right, I think we've armed our listener with everything they need to rock this interview.
I think so too.
Any final words of wisdom?
Just remember, this role is about more than just tests and data. It's about ensuring the quality and safety of products that people rely on. Let that passion shine through, and you'll be amazing.
Well said.
Yeah.
So to our listener, best of luck in your interview. We're confident you're going to do great.
And remember, the learning never stops. Keep diving deep into your field, and you'll go far.
That's a wrap on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another exciting exploration of a different career path.